There's a very specific kind of embarrassment that only cigar smokers understand. You're in a lounge, everything feels right, and your cigar has just gone out for the third time, while everyone else's burn line looks like it was drawn with a ruler.
Thanks for listening to the Cigar and Whiskey podcast. Subscribe and share with a fellow aficionado, and keep the journey going at cigarandwhiskeyguide.com, where every puff and pour has a story.
All right, let's talk about this. Because if your cigar keeps going out, the first thing that usually shows up isn't curiosity. It's self-doubt. You start wondering if you cut it wrong, lit it wrong, bought the wrong cigar, or somehow skipped a secret lesson everyone else got. I've had that moment, sitting there, trying to look composed, giving the cigar a thoughtful little spin like I'm analyzing construction. Inside, though, I'm thinking, why does this thing keep dying on me? And more importantly, does everyone notice? Here's the strange part. It feels personal. It shouldn't. We're talking about rolled tobacco and combustion physics. But when it won't stay lit, it feels like a verdict. Like you're failing some unspoken test of cigar competence. And we don't really talk about that side of it. We talk about wrapper types, flavor notes, and strength versus body. We debate humidity percentages and ring gauges. But the quiet frustration of a stubborn relight, that's usually handled in silence. Part of that is cultural. There's this subtle image in cigar spaces of the perfect smoke, slow cadence, long ash, razor-sharp burn line, no relights. It's never stated outright, but you absorb it. And when your cigar doesn't behave that way, you assume the problem is you. So what do? We overcorrect. We puff too often, trying to keep it alive. Or we let it sit too long because we don't want to look fidgety, especially if we're deep in conversation. Either way, the rhythm gets thrown off. And that's really what this is about. Rhythm. Cigars aren't performance pieces, they're handmade agricultural products. They respond to pace, oxygen, and attention. They don't respond well to pressure or ego. The experienced smokers you see with perfect burn lines, they relight too. They just don't attach identity to it. They don't treat a relight like a failure. They treat it like maintenance. Tap the ash, toast the foot, reset, continue. So in this episode, we're going to separate the psychology from the mechanics. We'll absolutely get into humidity, draw resistance, lighting technique, wind, and cadence. All of that matters. But first, we need to dismantle the myth that a cigar going out means you're doing it wrong. Because sometimes it's not a flaw, sometimes it's just a pause. And maybe the real problem isn't that your cigar keeps going out. Maybe it's that we've convinced ourselves it shouldn't. So now that we've cleared the psychological air a little bit, let's talk about rhythm. Because more often than not, when a cigar keeps going out, it's not a defect. It's a cadence issue. Most smokers fall into one of two camps. They either puff too often, trying to keep the ember roaring, or they treat the cigar like a decorative prop and forget it exists for 5 or 10 minutes at a time. Both approaches can kill a burn. If you puff too frequently, you actually overheat the cherry. The combustion zone gets too hot. The oils in the tobacco burn off faster than intended, and the cigar can start to burn unevenly. Eventually, that imbalance can choke the airflow, and the cigar simply gives up. On the other end of the spectrum, if you're deep in conversation, laughing, telling stories, setting the cigar down between thoughts, the ember cools. Combustion is just chemistry and oxygen. Take away the oxygen long enough, and the reaction slows, then stops. There's a sweet spot. Not a rigid rule, not a stopwatch situation, but a general rhythm. A slow draw roughly every 30 to 40 seconds keeps the ember stable without overheating it. Think of it less like fueling a fire and more like tending one. And here's where things get interesting. A lot of newer smokers are afraid to touch the cigar too often because they don't want to look anxious. So they undersmoke it. They wait too long. Then, when it goes out, they compensate by puffing aggressively, which destabilizes the next burn. It becomes a cycle. Too slow, then too fast. Too fast, then too slow. The cigar isn't the problem. The inconsistency is. Now let's add environment to the mix. If you're outside and there's wind, that moving air is stealing heat from the foot of the cigar constantly. You might need slightly more frequent draws just to maintain temperature. Indoors, in still air, you can relax more. Then, there's the length of the cigar itself. A longer cigar, especially in the first third, has more tobacco behind the burn line. That mass can retain moisture and coolness, making it slightly more demanding early on. It often settles into itself after a steady rhythm is established. And I'll say this too, not every cigar wants the same pace. A lighter-bodied Connecticut might burn differently than a dense, oily Maduro. Ring gauge plays a role. A thicker cigar has more surface area and more tobacco to keep lit. It sometimes forgives pauses more easily. But all of this comes back to attention. You don't have to babysit a cigar, but you do have to stay present with it. Feel the draw. Notice the smoke output. Watch the burn line without obsessing over it. After a short break, we'll get into the mechanics of why your cigar actually keeps going out, because at some point, we do have to talk about combustion and not just bruised egos.
You're listening to the Cigar and Whiskey Podcast, your companion for cigar culture, whiskey wisdom, and everything in between. Want more? Visit us anytime at cigarandwhiskeyguide.com for articles, reviews, and pairing tips.
So, let's start with the big one, humidity. If your humidor is running too wet, and I mean consistently north of that comfortable mid to high 60s range, the tobacco absorbs excess moisture. Wet tobacco resists ignition. It doesn't want to burn cleanly, it wants to steam. And when tobacco steams instead of burns, the ember struggles. You light it. It looks fine for a minute, then slowly fades. Not because you're incompetent, but because the cigar is carrying more moisture than it can efficiently combust. On the flip side, a cigar that's too dry will stay lit. Sure, but it'll burn hot and fast. The sweet spot is balance. Around 65 to 70% humidity works well for most cigars in most environments. Next up is draw resistance and construction. Cigars are handmade. That means some are packed tighter than others. If airflow is restricted, oxygen doesn't reach the ember consistently. No oxygen, no sustained combustion. The cigar suffocates, even if you're doing everything right. You might notice this if you have to pull unusually hard to get smoke. That tight draw isn't just annoying. It directly affects burn stability. A simple draw tool can sometimes correct it, but occasionally it's just the reality of handmade variants. Then there's the light itself. A rushed light creates a weak foundation. If you don't toast the foot evenly before taking your first real draws, you're starting with uneven combustion. That uneven start can lead to tunneling, canoeing, and eventually a cigar that goes out prematurely. Take your time at the beginning. Rotate the cigar, toast the edges, build a stable ember before you settle into your chair. Most long-term burn problems start in the first 60 seconds. Wind is another factor people underestimate. Moving air constantly steals heat from the cherry. Outdoors, especially on a breezy patio, you may need to make slightly more frequent draws just to maintain the temperature. It's not over-smoking, it's compensation for physics. And finally, cadence, which we already touched on, but it deserves mention here too. Long pauses cool the ember. Aggressive puffing overheats it. Consistency keeps it alive. Combustion is just a balance between heat, fuel, and oxygen. None of this is mystical, it's mechanical. And once you understand the mechanics, the frustration loses its mystery. Your cigar isn't judging you. It's responding to moisture, airflow, heat, and time. And those are things you can manage. All right, so now that we've covered the mechanics, let's talk about the part that actually lingers. Not the humidity, not the draw. The story you tell yourself when that cigar goes out. Because if we're honest, most of the frustration isn't technical, it's internal. The cigar dies, and immediately there's this little voice that says, "See? You're doing it wrong." And that voice is louder than it should be. There's a quiet myth in cigar culture that the real ones never relight. Perfect burn line, long, solid ash. One match, start to finish. It's a beautiful image. It's also not reality, not even for the guys who look effortless. I've watched seasoned smokers relight without blinking. They don't sigh. They don't explain themselves. They just tap the ash, give the foot a gentle toast, maybe purge it once, and carry on mid-sentence as if nothing happened. That's the difference. Not skill, Not secret knowledge, just perspective. They don't attach identity to it. And I think that's where a lot of newer smokers get tripped up. We treat the cigar like a performance, like we're being evaluated, when really no one in the room is keeping score. They're thinking about their own burn line. Some of my favorite cigar nights? Multiple relights, long stories. The cigar sits in the tray while someone tells a story that runs 10 minutes longer than expected. You come back to it, it's gone out, you smile, you relight. The conversation was worth it. If your cigar goes out because you were present, because you were laughing, because you were actually engaged with the people around you, that's not failure. That's the ritual working exactly as intended. Perfection is not the point of this hobby. It never was. Cigars are handmade, leaves grown in soil, rolled by human hands, influenced by weather, fermentation, storage, and time. The idea that they should behave like precision instruments is kind of ridiculous. And when we obsess over a flawless burn, we tighten up. We watch the ash like it's a stock ticker. We adjust every 30 seconds. We stop tasting and start managing. That's when the enjoyment drains out of it. There's a quiet maturity in accepting the relight. Tap it clean, toast it evenly, purge it, take a slow draw, let it settle back into rhythm, no apology or explanation, just move on. Because, at the end of the day, this isn't about proving you can keep a cigar lit without interruption. It's about slowing down long enough to enjoy it. And sometimes, a cigar going out is just a gentle reminder that you're allowed to pause and begin again. All right, so let's land this properly. Because if you zoom out for a second, this whole question, why does my cigar keep going out, isn't really about combustion. It's about expectation. Somewhere along the way, we absorbed this idea that a cigar should behave flawlessly from first light to final inch. And that expectation creates tension. When the burn isn't perfect, when the ash flakes early, when you have to relight, it feels like something went wrong. But here's the part that took me a while to understand. Cigars aren't built for perfection. They're built for participation. You're not just consuming something, you're tending it. Think about that. You toast it, you draw from it, you rotate it, you tap the ash, you adjust your rhythm. It's interactive. It responds to how you handle it, the air around you, and even the pace of your conversation. And if that sounds almost fragile, it is, in a good way. Because in a world where everything is optimized, automated, and instant, cigars still demand presence. They demand that you pay attention, not obsessively, just attentively. So when a cigar goes out, instead of reacting with that little spike of embarrassment, try reframing it. Ask a better question. Not what did I do wrong, but what is this telling me? Was I rushing? Was I distracted? Is my humidor running too wet? Did I rush the light? Those are solvable things, manageable things. None of them are character flaw. And sometimes the answer is even simpler. Maybe you were deep in conversation. Maybe you set it down longer than you realized. Or perhaps you were just enjoying the room more than the cherry. That's not failure. That's balance. I've relit cigars 3, 4, 5 times in an evening, especially on nights when the stories get long. And you know what? I don't remember the relights. I remember the laughter. I remember the company. I remember the moment. No one goes home saying, man, that was a great night, and my burn line was flawless. That's not the metric that matters. What matters is whether you slowed down, whether you tasted something interesting, whether you felt present and walked away a little more relaxed than when you arrived. So here's the practical takeaway. Keep your humidity reasonable. Pay attention to draw and construction. Take your time with the light. Find a steady rhythm. Adjust for wind. Those things will solve most persistent burn issues. But beyond that, let go of the myth. Relight calmly. Reset without drama. Stay engaged with the moment instead of monitoring the ash like it's a report card. And if this kind of conversation resonates with you, not just the mechanics, but the culture, the psychology, the ritual behind it, make sure you're subscribed wherever you're watching or listening. Follow the show, hit subscribe, turn on notifications if that's your thing, because we're not just talking cigars here. We're talking about how to slow down and actually enjoy them. If you've ever sat there quietly relighting and wondering if it was just you, it's not. You're in the right place. I'm honored to have been your host, Bo Kauffmann, and hope to see you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Cigar and Whiskey podcast. Subscribe and share with a fellow aficionado, and keep the journey going at cigarandwhiskeyguide.com, where every puff and pour has a story.